The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
But you're open to that idea, at least.
I am.
Tonight on Politics Now, the race for governor. We sit down with current Governor Steve Sisolak to talk about why he would break up CCSD, lifting the mask mandate, and rising crime.
Steve Sisolak destroyed many lives.
Republican challenger Michelle Fiore talks about the pandemic and why the FBI seized some of her records. Do you think Iowa loses its sort of #1 slot? Plus, presidential race jockeying. We catch up with the political director from our sister station in Des Moines, Iowa, as Nevada tries to beat Iowa to the front of the primary line.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. Governor Steve Sisolak, he is fresh off lifting Nevada's mask mandate. Tonight we sit down with the governor to talk about the upcoming re-election campaign, crime, and education. The campaign is underway certainly on the GOP side of things. You haven't really talked too much about the campaign, if at all, so far. When are you planning to really sort of start actually campaigning to keep your job?
Well, we're campaigning every single day. I'm out in the community. My primary focus now has been obviously fighting COVID. We've got our hands full fighting COVID and trying to keep our kids in school and our businesses open, not overwhelm the healthcare system. But I am certainly running for election. I'm out in the community, and we've got a team put together, and it's growing every single day, and looking forward to it.
You certainly have something of a record war chest right now. What have you taken away from your potential opponents in the general election? What you've seen of them, anyway.
Well, you know, I've watched it on the Republican side. There's a lot of them. You know, it's got to have a scorecard sometimes to keep track of who's in there. They seem to be spending most of their time right now attacking me and criticizing me as opposed to each other. And maybe they don't understand, to appeal to their base, they're going to have to start talking about each other. But we've got a lot of accomplishments that I think we can run upon, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm sure it'll be an exciting election season.
You recently ended the mask mandate in public places here in Nevada. You kind of addressed this certainly during the press conference after the announcement, but just talk about, again, why now?
Well, you know, it was why now. Some people think it was too early. Some people think it was too late. Basically, as some people said, I'm damned if I did and damned if I didn't, you know, when it came to the masks and when it came to the vaccines and when it came to the testing and when it came to various things. We made decisions in consultation with our business community, in consultation with our medical community and advisors and so forth. Cases were dropping.
Some criticism from Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who you obviously know, running as Republican for governor, specific with crime. Crime is up here in southern Nevada especially. He cites the lack of certain sentencing regulations that sort of handcuffs, pardon the pun, law enforcement when they're trying to punish those who have committed crimes. What do you say to the criticism of the changing in sentencing guidelines that maybe some might say is leading to the crime on the back end increasing?
Well, I don't know what he's talking about when he's talking about the changing in the sentencing. We had several bipartisan criminal justice bills go through that I want to point out the sheriff never opposed, or Metro never opposed when we were going through it. That's the time you need to make your opinions known. If you'd have felt strongly about it, he should have gone to Carson City and made his feelings known. He did not do that. Metro did not do that. We had a bipartisan bill that was passed as it relates to some criminal justice reforms. I think it's going to be better in the long run. I'm confident of that. But the crime problem, murders, homicides are at an all-time high. I mean, they've gone up, what, 45, 50% in the last year. That's not something that came out of my office. That's something that came out of the sheriff's office. And I think that they need to look within in terms of getting a handle on that.
CCSD was in distance learning longer than any other district, I'm pretty sure, in the state. There's been long talks by those on the Republican side, certainly, to try and break up CCSD. You've heard that discussion for years and years and years. Would you entertain that idea if you were reelected as governor, the idea of splitting up Clark County School District?
Certainly. You know, I want to know what parents want to do, and I've talked to a lot of parents. My kids were part of the Clark County School District. They went to Durango High School, and it's a big school. I mean, when you went to talk to your counselor, you've got one counselor for, 900 students. I mean, it's not exactly a great ratio. I'm definitely in support of that. I know the parents, the one good thing that came out of this, or one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, is parents are much more involved in their kids' educations right now in terms of voicing an opinion and what they'd like. And I think parents would like to see the school district broken up. One of the problems you get with breaking it up, if you've got some affluent areas, if you're talking about Summerlin or Green Valley, and then you've got the urban core, well, everybody deserves access to the same quality education. So you'd have to come up with a plan so that all students would have the ability to get a quality education.
But what else would you tackle if you're reelected as governor? What would be sort of top on your agenda besides those sort of two aspects?
Well, there's one that it takes in several things. The affordability of housing also includes homelessness, as far as I'm concerned. We need to start looking at that. You know, we've made the American dream for young people coming up, the dream of owning your own home and, you know, building up equity in retirement is almost become impossible. I mean, entry-level homes in Reno, starter homes are over $500,000 just to get in the door. And Southern Nevada is bumping right up against a $500,000 number. That's not really a viable scenario for someone that's getting a job making even $20 or $25 an hour.
Now, Governor Sisolak is the latest of many politicians on both sides of the political aisle to float breaking up Clark County School District. We're going to delve a lot deeper into that issue in later editions of Politics Now. Now, speaking of the race for governor, it is a crowded field of 10 Republicans trying to win the chance to face off against Governor Sisolak in the general election. Las Vegas City Councilwoman Michelle Fiore, she is one of them. She has been third or fourth in fundraising and polling so far. Now, Fiore has a history of making controversial statements, and I started off by asking her about an FBI raid on her office in 2021. We should note, though, no charges have been filed. You're under a federal investigation right now for
wait, stop.
Okay, go ahead.
Why would you say something like that? Did you verify that with the FBI?
Well, then help me understand.
Yeah, no,
let's clear the air because it's been reported.
Let's definitely clear the air.
Go for it.
All right? You need to, any investigative journalist needs to literally call the FBI and verify that I'm under investigation, because they're not going to tell you I'm under investigation. Now, did I talk to them a year ago? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I spoke with the FBI. They had some questions, and you know what? They're an agency, and when they ask you questions, you answer them. But when you want to turn around and say, I'm under FBI investigation, unless you verify that with that particular agency, that's not a fair statement.
Okay, so you're not under federal investigation, you're saying?
I would say not.
Okay. How many times had the FBI, now this has been reported,
Yeah.
raided your house or your office?
So first of all, the FBI raid, okay, the FBI did not raid my house. So a year ago, on January 27th, the FBI knocked on my door, came in my house, looted, robbed, and raided it on January 27th. So it wasn't a raid. And this was over a year ago. So, you know, that's the answer that you want. That's the answer you're going to get, because it's always going to be the truth.
You have touted in the past, in your long career in politics here, that you've never been politically correct.
Yep, I'm not going to start.
And that you don't plan to start. Why do you believe that is a good quality to have in the governor's mansion?
Because you need to be truthful with the people, right? So as a person that represents the people, sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times elected officials will not be truthful with the people. And they'll do what they're told by whom they think, and without asking the people for their opinions or their advice. So sometimes when you speak with our constituents here in the state of Nevada, I think being truthful will always be the right answer, and whether it's popular or not, and whether you say it in a politically correct way, I think we owe it to Nevadans to always let them know what's going on.
On the point of the pandemic, as governor, if you were governor at the beginning of the pandemic, how would you have done things differently than Governor Sisolak?
I wouldn't have shut the state down, number one. I wouldn't have put people out of work, number two. I wouldn't have mandated vaccines where now they were forced to resign, our nurses and teachers, number three. Number four, our unemployment system, it wasn't the director's problems, why he kept firing people to make himself look good. That was all our antiquated systems. Our antiquated systems that weren't paying people their unemployment check because they were their companies were forced to shut down. Steve Sisolak destroyed many lives in the process of his emergency orders that he took total advantage of.
Murder, crime, they're up, big concerns, the violent crime rates going up. What would you do to deal with that issue as governor, whether it comes to laws or funding or whatever the case may be with regards to law enforcement?
I would make sure that they're funded. I would make sure that the handcuffs on our police are off, right?
Like what kind of handcuffs?
Well, I'll give you a great, for instance, these protests, right? Were they protests? Or were they violent, breaking our windows, putting things on fire? I mean, they're calling them peaceful protests? That's not peaceful, right? And what did our governor do? He marched with them. What did Joe Lombardo do when we wanted to do a Blue Lives Matter march, right? And we're law-abiding. We're not going to be breaking things. We're sweet. We're going to march down Las Vegas Boulevard for our cops. Joe Lombardo calls me up and says, Michelle, you can't do this protest. You can't do this march. But yet, the domestic terrorist group organization, Black Lives Matter, got to do theirs. You know why? Because they didn't ask permission, right?
Just to back up, are you suggesting that the Black Lives Matter movement is domestic terrorist?
Without a doubt, 100%. Their display of what they did, right? They can march all day long, right? But when you break minority businesses, shoot cops, when you don't think that's domestic terrorism?
There's a lot more to that. In fact, we asked Fiore about her relationship with fellow city councilwoman Victoria Seaman and a reported physical altercation between the two. She said she wouldn't get physical with anyone first, but called her a friend. Now, full interviews with Governor Sisolak and Councilwoman Fiore, they are on 8newsnow.com. You can also watch our other discussions with the gubernatorial candidates so far. In other political news, one big factor in the election is how voters think about President Joe Biden. The latest poll from Civiqs has, as you see over my screen here, 56% disapproval versus 34% approval for the entire country. Here in Nevada, it's about the same. As you see here, 57% disapprove of the president's performance so far, 35% approve. Among independents here in Nevada, 67% disapprove of the president's performance so far in his term, 25% approve. Numbers to watch as the political season continues along. Next on Politics Now, will Nevada take the top spot? We'll tell you what's going on behind the scenes in Iowa that could vault Nevada to the front of the presidential.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
The Democratic National Committee may shuffle its presidential nominating process. Iowa and New Hampshire are traditionally the first two states followed by Nevada. Both Nevada and Iowa's caucuses, as you'll remember back in 2020, had technical issues. After that, here in Nevada, we switched to a primary and passed a bill trying to be the first state to help decide a candidate. The next presidential election seems a long way off, but we're already starting to look ahead because there are some changes possibly in how the primary system works here. Dave Price is joining us from our sister station at WHO in Des Moines, Iowa, because, Dave, it's a chance Iowa won't be first anymore. Dave, thank you for joining us here. What is the state of play from Iowa's point of view on where things might fit in with the presidential campaigns?
I would say nervous, and I think I've been here 20 years now, but I think this is probably the most nervous that party officials have become here on either side here. Obviously, most of the nerves are on the Democratic side this time around. And there's a lot of brainstorming going on behind the scenes. And there's not a lot of public comments, if you will, even from folks who normally talk a lot. Right now they're trying to figure out, do we come up with a new strategy? They're looking ahead to that March meeting with the Democratic National Committee members there, and they realize that Iowa is really, really under the gun, so they're looking at whether they need to possibly even change the format of the caucuses one way or the other as a way to maybe save this.
You know, Nevada officials have tried for a long time to try and get ahead in the whole schedule of events. A lot of folks here certainly would think that Nevada is maybe more representative of the country in terms of trying to pick a presidential candidate. Why is Iowa so eager to stay first in the presidential campaigns?
Yeah, and, you know, I think Iowans have been listening to that criticism for a long time. It's still primarily a very white state. It's changing, but still very white. Now, what Democrats in particular will say is, look at the last several winners here. There was a black man, Barack Obama, who won. There was a woman, Hillary Clinton, who won. There was a gay man, Pete Buttigieg, who won. So those are the last three Democratic caucus winners. So they say, yes, overwhelmingly, this is a white state where most people are white. The non-white population is growing, and frankly, growing a lot faster than the white population, so they think that ought to count for something. They like the fact that it's a good mix of urban and rural, and they think that despite the fact that there are a lot of white people here, Democrats who turn out are diverse in thought and are welcoming for all backgrounds of people, and they think that should count for something.
When the DNC makes its decision, do you think Iowa loses its sort of #1 slot?
That's what they really have to. They hope not. They know that there's a decent chance that could happen. That's why they know from a realistic standpoint, the caucus of last cycle will probably not be the way it looks for the next cycle, no matter how this plays out. There will likely be some adjustments, and that's what party officials are discussing this month. Do they come up with a different way to do this, to try to get more people to to be involved here, for example? But they're clearly nervous, and they know that they may have to look at options they would never consider before. Do they share it with another state? So like Nevada, for example, here, a more diverse state that's also using a primary. Does it make more sense for Iowa and Nevada to go first? And then maybe it's New Hampshire and South Carolina, whatever it is. So they realize they're going to have to think about some other alternatives here. But bottom line, they want to try to come up with whatever they can do to try to keep it first, even if maybe they would have to share it with somebody else.
Very interesting. Dave Price from our sister station in Des Moines, WHO, thank you very much for your insight. Good to see you. Other political news, another Republican entering the race for Nevada Attorney General. Commercial real estate attorney Tisha Black is now a candidate for the post. She says she wants to support Second Amendment rights and fight overreach from Washington, D.C. Fellow Republican Sigal Chattah quickly responded to the announcement. She calls Black a Democratic plant. Chattah has gained notoriety for lawsuits she's filed against coronavirus mandates. Some of those lawsuits she has won. Is another war on the horizon? Next on Politics Now, Senator Jackie Rosen discusses the ongoing dispute between Russia and Ukraine. Plus,
why inflation could get worse and what lawmakers are doing about it. I'm Hannah Brandt in Washington. I'll have that.
You're watching Politics Now.
Overseas, Russia is still threatening to invade Ukraine. Troops are conducting exercises on the border. As you see, diplomatic tensions are high. Nevada Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen is on the Armed Services and Homeland Security committees.
The United States is #1 going to exhaust every diplomatic solution to this problem because we don't want to have anybody risk their lives, and we surely don't want to have anyone go to war. With that being said, we also want to be sure that Vladimir Putin understands that we will not allow him to have any more aggressive behavior. He's posturing in the region. We know over 100,000 troops. He's been moving them around, doing various exercises. We want to let our NATO allies and partners know that we stand with them, and let Vladimir Putin know we're going to stand up against him.
Senator Rosen is also a co-sponsor of a bill that would economically sanction some Russian banks and some top Russian military officials. Here at home, economic leaders warn inflation could get worse, but they disagree about what to do with that. Washington reporter Hannah Brandt breaks down the arguments.
If Russia invades Ukraine, it could cost the U.S.
I will not pretend this will be painless. There could be impact on our energy prices.
This warning comes as inflation is already surging, something Republicans like Senator Rob Portman blame partly on the spending included in the American Rescue Plan.
You can't just throw the stimulus in and change the policies on the supply side as well and not expect inflation to rage.
Senator Mitch McConnell connects high energy costs to the president's policies, including shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline and limiting offshore drilling.
And if the president is serious about providing relief for Americans at the pump or blunting Putin's manipulation of energy markets, he will stop his administration's anti-energy policies.
Democrats say they are actively looking for solutions, and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer suggests Republicans do more than just complain.
Republicans seem to have no solutions, just rhetoric. These challenges demand action, and Democrats remain laser-focused on lowering costs.
One thing Democrats are considering is a temporary federal gas tax holiday. And Senator Bob Casey says Americans want the policies that Democrats are pushing.
Having their child care costs go down could help provide some relief. having other costs go down. The price of prescription drugs should go down.
Senator Rick Scott thinks the solution comes down to cutting regulations.
Stop spending money. Stop making it difficult to open and build a business. Stop making it difficult to run a business.
In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is making sure nominees for top defense positions will look into unidentified aerial phenomena. Unexplained video like these here, well, they were at the center of a recent report. Now, this is her questioning the nominee for the Defense Department Inspector General this week.
If confirmed, can I have your commitment to sustain this comprehensive assessment until it reaches its appropriate conclusion, including the possibility of follow-on actions such as audits or investigations if the assessment recommends as much?
Well, again, I honestly am not familiar with that particular review, but as is typical, I think, across the IG community, when a new IG comes in, if they're pending matters, those would continue in the office, and it would be perfectly appropriate to examine them. And if I am confirmed, I can assure you that anything that's pending in the office, I'll give my best attention to.
So that nominee is Robert Storch. Senator Gillibrand was instrumental in getting the UAP study into the defense bill. Next on Politics Now, the next SCOTUS Supreme Court Justice, when we can expect President Joe Biden to name a nominee. This week in What to Watch, a potential Supreme Court nominee. President Joe Biden said he would nominate a black woman to the post to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. The president did say he's done a deep dive on 4 possible Supreme Court candidates. However, he has not named a final nominee just yet. He has a self-imposed end of February deadline, and of course that is right around the horizon. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. It is something to watch. We thank you so much for watching Politics Now. Don't forget you can stay up to date on all the political news online. Just head to 8newsnow.com. We're back with you next Saturday. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.